and call to order the public meeting of the Colorado State Board of Land Commissioners. Today is Wednesday, June 10th, 2020. The meeting is being conducted via Zoom web conferencing. As we begin, we have our first item is open public comment, and we allow members of the public to address the commissioners on any non-agenda items. If you are on this Zoom meeting and are a member of the public and wish to comment on a non-agenda item, do we want them to click the raise hand button, Nick?
Yes, sir. That would be good.
Please click the raise hand button that is on your screen. We see any hands raised?
Oh, sir, nothing's coming up.
Okay. We'll move on to item B, announcements. Director Ryan, any announcements from your perspective?
I think we covered most in the staff report, but we're continuing to work remotely for the most part. We expect that to continue until early September is what we've been advised, the safer at home. But I just want to commend our staff, and a lot of them are listening today, that I really feel like we've been very productive and kept the wheels of progress turning despite the fact that we're all remote. There's lots of meetings, lots of Google Docs being shared, lots of inspections getting done, and I just want to say publicly how impressed I am with the work our team is doing and how quickly we adapted to this. So that would be my only announcement, Commissioner. I think the rest of it's covered in staff report.
Any other comments or announcements from commissioners? Okay. Seeing none. Our next item is Department of Natural Resources update. Is Mr. Vilsack? Can we invite him to the podium?
I see him here. We got to promote him.
Welcome, Doug.
Doug, you got to unmute.
Got my video, but didn't get the mute button. Morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Thanks for having me. Yes, as Bill mentioned, we have a lot going on. Certainly still kind of working on COVID-19 response. We've transitioned now from the safer at home phase to the safer at home and in the vast great outdoors. Kind of a hat tip to DNR and the governor's interest in encouraging folks to get outside. And so we've been spending a lot of time in the last couple weeks putting together guidance, putting together basically materials to encourage folks to get outdoors, but to do it safely, and as well working with a lot of the businesses that are associated with DNR, outfitters, guides, rafters, those types of folks, to make sure that there is essentially proper protocols in place and that they know that they are able to operate. So a lot of work between CPW and DNR on some of that guidance over the past few weeks. Of course, as well, kind of our dual challenges these days, a lot of conversation internally at DNR, and I believe Bill and a lot of the staff members on the phone as well have been involved in conversations around the death of George Floyd and kind of racial inequity and disparity in the nation. Director Gibbs has taken a pretty strong position on that and a leadership role. We had an internal meeting with 500 or 600 DNR employees a couple weeks ago, really just to open a dialogue between the director and our employees about those issues. And I know Director Gibbs has had a lot of personal conversations with a lot of our DNR employees as well. We have no real answers, as I think many people don't, but we are having a lot of conversations, and I think there's a commitment, certainly at the DNR level, and I think shared by the governor, to really make progress on some of these issues. So we are just starting that conversation. Related to our budget, obviously the legislature is back in session. a lot of kind of movement on the budget front. I think probably the most significant impact to DNR on the budget front was a transfer of 45.5 million from the perpetual base fund to the general fund to essentially allow the state to pay its bills. So the perpetual base fund is severance tax funds that are generally used for water project loans and just kind of water in general. So obviously a challenge for us as we think about implementation of the water plan, but of course times are tough and this isn't unprecedented. Other than that, there were certainly a few changes made around para, kind of base salaries for staff, those types of things. DNR is mainly not a general funded agency. Of course, the State Land Board isn't really our only mainly general funded agency is the Division of Water Resources. So that's been the kind of big impact from a lot of this. I think DWR has been working to address those issues, and I think the governor's office realizes that we can't, not manage our water even when times are challenging. Related to the budget, I know we have been watching the School Finance Act quite a bit, and just kind of sending emails back and forth around about that, as that can sometimes relate to the State Land Board. There was an amendment attempt earlier this week on the School Finance Act to direct additional interest income from the permanent fund just 2 schools this year. That did not pass, although I know those conversations are ongoing. The bill is up in Senate Finance today, so I'm sure there'll be more conversations about changes to the formula. From what I've seen, it's only this year. The one silver lining I would say is that Representative McCluskey did take the opportunity to talk about the shrinking trust issue on the mic during that amendment debate. So it's on the minds of some folks in the legislature. But we'll see.
What day did that occur? So I can go back and hear the audio.
The days are running together, Bill.
Yeah, I know. Because we were pinging each other throughout.
It would have been Monday. I actually just sent you the amendment. I
Okay.
just pulled it as I was waiting to get on, and so you can take a look at that, and we'll see what pops up today. I mean, as you know, there have been additional conversations. Who knows what else folks will try. So we'll see. Take a look at that amendment, and we can chat maybe later today because we'll probably see more. Other than that, kind of with the legislature, our general annual bills for water and species are moving through the process, thankfully. Senate Bill 3, our seemingly undying parks bill, has been winnowed down to 1 million, but it is surviving. Passed out of appropriations unanimously today, so we very well might see at least a little general fund support for the build out of Fisher's Peak, which is fantastic, and certainly fantastic in very challenging budget times. Senate Bill 89, which I know everybody here was interested in, is gone. We'll see if those conversations come back at some future date, but obviously it wasn't the time to address that today. And yeah, I think just kind of related to the shrinking trust issue, certainly not necessarily for this session, but Director Ryan and I have been discussing a lot about how to at least daylight that issue, certainly internally at DNR and with the governor's office through our annual bill proposal process. So kind of working on some materials there to at least make sure that kind of along with other bill proposals, conversations that we want to have in the next year, that gets up to a higher level. And we have that conversation and have at least some sense of the path forward from the governor's office moving forward. So not that issue is not hopefully will not languish any longer.
Thank you for coming up and encouraging that. Appreciate it. I know we've been wrestling with it, but I appreciate that as a step forward. So
yeah, I mean, I think the challenge is it's many entities and people's issues. You know, the State Land Board is involved, so hopefully we can at least be the folks that kind of daylight it and bring it to a higher level. Whether the State Land Board and DNR will be the one specifically kind of leading the charge to make any of the necessary changes, I think that remains to be seen. But at least we can kind of bring it up. And I think Bill has certainly been very, very good at trying to put all those materials and really queue up the issue for broader debate. So Other than that, just kind of related to our agencies, Parks and Wildlife, obviously very engaged in working on COVID-19. That's kind of occupied a lot of our time. We're really seeing just remaining huge increases in the use of our facilities. CPW in the spring saw a 30 or 40% increase at visitation to state parks. We've also heard the same thing from our federal land managers. I was on a call yesterday where the Forest Service and BLM essentially said that weekdays are now like weekends in terms of usage, and weekends, every weekend is like a holiday weekend. And
Wow.
Who knows what'll happen on the 4th of July. So folks are obviously taking the opportunity to not get on planes and to buy campers and to get out into the wilderness and to campgrounds, which is a good thing, but also challenging as well, all that new usage. Also, just kind of on the federal front, we're seeing a lot of action related to DNR from the federal administration these days. I think most significantly and recently, the president's executive order last week directing federal agencies to bypass NEPA, the Endangered Species Act, the Clean Water Act, and FLPMA is of great concern, I think, to the administration. Again, that's pretty recent, but you'll hear a lot more from us and the governor, I think, on some of those directives, especially as it relates to specific projects, if that directive is followed related to projects here in the state. So we'll be watching that quite closely. On the waterfront, I think I mentioned that transfer out of the perpetual base fund, again, a challenge, but we're continuing to work on the water plan. We did have a pretty decent snow year, but that dissipated quickly. And so I think, as some of you probably know as well, significant drought across the southern part of the state. Got 4 inches of snow up in the mountains earlier this week, which is good. But we certainly will have problems in southern Colorado this summer with drought. And then lastly, certainly related to State Land Board, COGCC is continuing on the rulemaking timeline. I think, as I mentioned last meeting, the major rulemakings will be in August and September, and they're actually gaveling in today to do wellbore integrity, which has been on the list of things to do for quite some time. But in general, just gearing up to notice the rules for the rulemaking in August and September. And trying to push those concepts forward. As well, there in statute is a requirement that a new professional commission be seated on July 1st. And so I know that the governor's office and COGCC are diligently working to make that happen as well. So we'll have a new commission here very soon. And I think, as the State Land Board and some of your folks can probably address even better than me, they've seen just a significant drop off in Form 2s and 2As. Yeah, not a tremendous amount going on in terms of new drilling these days in Colorado or anywhere with the kind of downturn in oil and gas. So that's all I got. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Doug. Any questions or thoughts for Doug? Great.
Doug, just thank you again for all the real-time communication during the budget stuff. That has been moving so fast, and so many amendments get thrown out there, and people need to be able to communicate instantly about the repercussions of these things. And you and Carly and the team over there have done a great job trying to communicate real time so that we can head off the bad ones and support the good ones.
Yeah, we'll keep an eye on Senate Finance today. I think, as you saw, we've had some indication that at least there's been talks about amendments related to the permanent fund and some of this. And so we'll see. I doubt we'll see most of those. They'll probably just happen or not. And then probably tonight, if we need to look at them and get any feedback back to those folks before the bill is up on second reading, which I would expect would be tomorrow. So we'll see. Yeah,
and they're trying to end the session on Friday, right?
Theoretically. That seems tremendously ambitious, but you never know. As long as our stuff gets through, I suppose, I'm fine with that.
Great. All right. Thank you, Doug. Appreciate
Thanks,
it. On to information items. 1A, which is tab 3, our staff report. New format. Thanks, Barb. I like sort of the highlights at the front. Any questions or from commissioners related to the information, or Director Ryan, anything you'd want to draw our attention to or emphasize?
I appreciate your shout out to Barb, but again, we tried to find a way to make this a little bit more user friendly. I don't have anything to add to it.
Bill, can I ask
Yes.
you were, I think at one point you wanted me to talk about TNC, but I don't know when that was.
Oh, yeah, would you do that? I'm sorry. Thank you, Greg.
Yeah.
Thanks for the reminder. That from yesterday to today, I lost that thought.
So just sort of an update for commissioners. I spoke with some of our folks that we work closely with at TNC yesterday. As an organization, they are looking for, well, they're looking backward to previous times when there were serious hiccups in the economy and what their funding looked like 12 months later. And typically they saw a downturn. So they have taken some steps proactively to plan for that, what they assume will be a reduction in funding. How it impacts the land board is one of the people that we've worked closely with over the years, and that some of you probably know, William Burnage, is being reassigned. He will still live in Colorado, but his focus area, historically, his focus has been grasslands nationally, their grasslands and grazing program nationally, and then Colorado specific projects. He helped us with Lowry Ranch stewardship framework that we put together a year or so ago. He is going to continue on the national grazing grasslands program, but he will be focused on Kansas in terms of, rather than Colorado. His Colorado responsibilities are being picked up by a couple of people we've also worked with, Anya Byers, who presented the Brett Gray management plan to you all in January and December, and Matt Moorhead, who you, I think, have met, and actually he'll be on a panel discussion with you next month. So we're in good hands, and William wanted me to express his appreciation for all that. He's worked with the board for a long time, longer than I have actually. So wanted to express his appreciation. We said we would continue to look for projects that we might work on together. And if we hear anything else about changes, we'll let you know.
Great, thanks. Any questions or comments related to the staff report? Okay. Maybe, I don't know who it would be for, but I mean, with those drought conditions, are we seeing any, have we had any requests for relief?
Not, we've probably, I'll speak in general. I don't, unless William Woolston's on. My understanding is we've had a couple of inquiries. We haven't done anything yet. I think probably more on the proactive side, the district managers are keeping an eye on it and prepared to reduce stocking rates and other adjustments if they need to. So we're still monitoring, nothing
Okay.
substantial yet.
Okay, I see William was invited. William, any comments from you?
Good morning, Commissioners. William Woolston, Field Operations Lead. Just a quick comment. I had a discussion with Justin this morning as an update to Greg's comments. We have had a few, and Greg and I are getting together tomorrow. We're going to I'd like to discuss this with him as to how to go forward. I'm not hearing a lot, but we are starting to have a few. Justin Osborne has had about 5 in the last few days. So
Okay.
I just wanted to add that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner,
yeah.
Commissioner Butter, let me ask you a question because I think this will come up tomorrow. The last time we took broad action on reducing stocking rates, we asked the board, we actually got a board order to do that. Is there, just give me some sense, do you want to take board action regardless of if it's, you know, a couple dozen and we're dealing with them proactively? We could just say that's up to staff, but I don't know how you want the board to be involved in that decision.
I might ask commissioners if they would like to hear more. I mean, I think, do you recall last time, I mean, the extent, how
Yeah.
extensive the relief we
Well,
provided was?
I think it was in 2013, and I think the reason we came to the board was historically the board had done what I would call it rent credits. And we were trying to get away from the notion of rent credits. And so we initiated, I think, a much more logical, appropriate program in which if the district manager works with the lessee to reduce stocking in response to drought, we will then adjust their rent accordingly on their next bill. We had them sign a letter that said they understood that they were destocking and that they would maintain the destocking until allowed to restock. So there were some specific things we did last time that I think it was good to have the board give us direction. And it was that long-term drought. I think we saw like a 20% reduction in grazing revenues. I don't think we're there yet. And I could also argue that, changing rates is just part of the normal work that our district managers do. So I just want to know how to approach it because it'll affect our timing.
Yeah.
How quickly we respond.
From my perspective, I think it's hard to tell the scale of it yet. And I'm thinking that it's still sort of case by case and maybe it's, I don't sense it's broad enough to want to bring to the board with a sort of statewide policy. And instead, my preference would be to leave it to the discretion of our DMs to do that on a one-off basis as part of their day-to-day work.
Yeah.
And we could report, I think we could report that to you every month in the staff report. If you start seeing an order of magnitude that you want to spend more time on, then we could bring it to you.
Sure. And just to be clear, destocking is about caring for the land is part of it. Yeah. I mean,
Absolutely.
It's in our interest long-term to incent or work with our lessees to, and by reducing stock during a drought, the wear and tear on the land is less.
Yeah, absolutely correct. The recovery time will be shorter. The impact to the land will not be as severe.
Yeah. Commissioner Carney, any perspective you'd want to throw on this?
Yep, I think it's like they've said, and I can speak for Southeast Colorado, and there are some areas that are pretty serious, but then 15 miles away, it's okay. So I think it's like taking it by base case is the way to go right now, I think.
Okay. Commissioners, other just sort of head nod, comfortable with moving forward on this? Okay, great.
Thank you.
Yep, thanks. Okay, next item, financial update and a portfolio evaluation with Nick Massey. Morning, Nick.
Morning. You see my presentation?
Yep.
Just making sure this time. Good morning, commissioners. It's a rare treat to get to talk to you before lunch. Nick Massey, Assistant Director, bringing you a little bit of an update on where we're at with forecasting for revenue through the close of the year and into the coming years. We've had I wanted to point out that there isn't a memo in the board packet intentionally on this. In the last month or so, I put a fairly extensive report in the staff report about this same kind of information. And since it's just an update, I'm just doing a presentation on it. And we've had a couple of requests, ultimately from the Department of Ed, asking us to try to forecast what state land board revenues might look like in the coming year or two, because they're trying to make some decisions about what they do for the funding in the BEST program. So just making sure that our commissioners are as informed as possible on the information that we're sharing with the kind of a wider legislative world. So with a month left in the year, oh, I can't get my screen to advance. we're sitting at about 90% of the revenue we forecast for the year. It's minerals that's a little bit more behind than usual. And we typically book between 8 and 12 million in revenue for minerals in the month of June. So even on the high end of that range, you know, if we were to book 12 million, we're a little bit short of where we had forecast. It's about 5 million short, which is a few percent. I don't think we're yet reflecting the impacts of the industry downturn in the revenue bookings. But we'll see what this last month of revenue looks like. The economics of oil production remain very unstable. Low prices continue in the DJ Basin. We're being asked increasingly to shut in the wells on state land board properties. New wells aren't being drilled, or if they're drilled, they're not being completed. And so the product on which we receive royalties in the very near future is drying up. To a small number of audiences, we're forecasting a base case scenario as well as kind of a low revenue, low volume scenario. And so I just wanted to walk you through a couple of those data points on what that looks like. Currently, oil prices for DJ Basin oil are 25, 26 bucks, and that's that kind of lower red line range. By comparison, we understand break-even pricing on oil in our market to be $45 to $50 a barrel. So we've got some ongoing challenges for producers on Colorado oil. Operators had been notifying us of new wells at a rate of between 100 to 250 new wells a year for several years. We anticipate new wells falling to near zero for a sustained period. We know that for the last several months, wells have really not been drilled very often. We hear from COGCC that the request for permits has gone from several hundred a month to less than the number you can count on one hand. So we've got some challenges with well completion, well drilling in our revenue forecast. And so in the resulting, in our forecasting, we're anticipating the resulting production of all this downturn to see drops between 40 and 60% of the production that we saw in fiscal year 20 of oil. So in dollar terms, we're forecasting the possibility of a significant drop in funds flowing to the permanent fund. As mineral revenues suffer significantly, we see total revenues dropping to below 90 million as a real possibility. That results in some deep cuts in our ability to retain earnings in the permanent fund. You heard Doug Vilsack mention that Senate Bill 89 had been abandoned, or I'm not sure the correct term, but and that removes an immediate threat that we saw to the revenue to the permanent fund, because it was a $15 million minimum draw from state land board revenues before giving any credit to the permanent fund. But like Doug said, that has gone away. In some versions of this forecast with that built in, as you would imagine, we were seeing essentially negative numbers of revenue available to the permanent fund. So here's the same data graphically, just kind of emphasizing that the funds that we're able to send to the permanent fund or retain in the permanent fund, there's a scenario that's very real that those funds essentially dry up. I'm happy to kind of entertain any questions. Bill and I have been having lots of conversations with different folks about this over the last couple of weeks. And we're happy to hear what your questions and concerns are about our forecast.
Nick, I should also note that I had a lengthy conversation with the head of BEST last week also. He had these projections through the sort of state budget channels, but it was an opportunity for him to just talk them through with me and understand that he's forecasting his own potential revenues correctly. So we are reaching out to our impacted partners on this as well.
And it doesn't seem like there's a lot of room for, you know, pushback or anything, but what was the nature, what was his perspective?
Well, it was interesting. There had been, until very recently, some proposals to raise the COP debt service limit for basically allow BEST to issue more bonds and raise the debt service cap by $20 million, which the state share would have been 10. His own board looked at our numbers and said, we don't see how that's workable, but they were looking at both our historic revenues and marijuana revenues. And that amendment's not going to go forward, but I think it was a wake-up call for some folks who still thought that they could increase the debt amount, and that between the land board or marijuana excise taxes, that would get covered, and that's just not the case.
Yeah. Okay. Any questions for Nick?
We will keep updating you on that. You know, I'd love for our projections to be low, but given what we've seen in terms of rig counts falling to almost nothing, new permits falling, shut-in requests, and the price of oil, it's clear that both the price and the production are going to be down dramatically next year.
Okay. Thanks. Next item is the portfolio evaluation. Stay with Nick.
That's me again. And sure. All right. We good on the screen?
Yep.
Just got to make sure. Thank you, Commissioner. Nick Massey again for the record, Assistant Director. And this presentation is supplemental to the materials provided in the board packet this month. And lag. There we go. This is a presentation template that I've used in the past, so you'll recognize some of these graphics, I think. But you know, as a group of commissioners, and you make some really important decisions about all these places in Colorado. And it's a portfolio that we're valuing this year at just under $4 billion. That's 3.5% smaller than last year, and I'll show you how that's due to a significant decrease in the value that we've applied to our mineral assets. You know, the short and the sweet of it is, because we use a revenue model to determine long-term value of parts of our portfolio, the sinkage of revenue on the mineral portfolio is hurting the valuation this year. 2019, and I'll talk about, when I say this year, it means kind of where we left 2019 in terms of portfolio. 2019 was the 6th year evaluation on the portfolio of the assets of the whole trust. Last year, we had a value on the land surface assets of the trust at $2.38 billion. We use the USDA's Colorado Land Value Survey data, which is a survey that they do now annually in cooperation with I think it's Cornell University, to come up with a valuation of our surface assets. That number this year grows to $2.406 billion, which is just over a 1% increase, or about $27 million. In smaller numbers, that represents an increase of about $10 an acre on the valuation. It's grazing land appreciation that is driving the increase this year. Most other components are either relatively small or didn't change much to make the whole number change. Last year on minerals, we valued the portfolio at $540 million. The model itself is unchanged, but with the uncertainty in the markets, we've refreshed the input variables to kind of reflect a very conservative number. As you saw a moment ago in my first presentation, we've been talking about no new well starts, waning production from existing wells because of shut-ins, continued depressed oil prices, and all of these things combine to a modified valuation this year of that portfolio of about $260 million. That's a decrease of 52%. As a reminder, we don't have a mechanism that allows us to value the mineral that we have in the ground. Ours is a model that's derived from the revenues that we receive. And so we've got kind of a down valuation this year. The commercial portfolio, we value it on a model we've been using since at least 2014. Within the model, we haven't adjusted any of the market comparisons. There are some pieces of the model that are based on market comps, and there are some pieces that are based on cap rates. Both the market comps and the cap rates in the model this year didn't change. As a reminder, the Clear Creek Square building in Golden was actually added to the valuation last year, so we saw a little pop between 2 years ago and last year's valuation. But we've had some increased revenue on the total portfolio. And so the 118 million this year, we're valuing at 121, which is about a 2.5% increase. So that leaves us with a permanent fund. At the close of last year, or the beginning of this, no, the close of last year, the balance in the permanent fund was $1.043 billion. And that is now $1.148 billion. That's a 10% increase. That's pretty sizable. Of course, to this point, the permanent fund has benefited from annual infusions of state land board revenue. In this number, there was a little bit of residual marijuana excise tax revenue. It's my understanding that the permanent fund will no longer receive revenues from marijuana taxes. So that little component goes away. And then the investments themselves saw a little bit of growth as well. So as a percentage of the total portfolio value, our surface is about 60% of the total value of the portfolio, and our permanent fund is about 30% of the total number. Last year, the four components of the portfolio made $156 million. This year, so at the end of 2019, it was $177 million in earnings, which is an increase of about 13%. Minerals made up 123 million of that 177, pretty consistent with how they've traditionally performed. As we've been talking about, we sort of expect that number to decline pretty aggressively in the next year or two. Our surface uses, both in agriculture and renewable energy, made about 20 million of that 177. Commercial portfolio netted about 4 million to the trust. And the permanent fund was about 30 million of the 177. As a percent of total revenue, we talk about this, I think, fairly regularly, that while minerals makes up this year 7% of the total portfolio, it brings in 70% of the revenues. And the land uses that make up 30% or bring in a fairly small portion of the total revenue. Most components of the portfolio saw returns on their value relatively unchanged from last year, with the exception, of course, of minerals. Because of that devaluation of the minerals portfolio, we see a spike in the return percentage. The total return on the portfolio then also grows by a little bit more than 0.5%. My slide went away. I guess I think I'm going to cut my presentation at that point because some of this information from here is a bit repetitive. So I would be happy to entertain questions about that material from anyone, any other commissioners.
Any questions? I mean, looking still, and I'm sure Bill at some point in our discussion around more active management of the portfolio, and knowing that some of our peers have divested of all their land and effectively are an endowment. I mean, 5% off a $3.9 billion corpus is 195 million. And you look at sort of the swings and the presentation that Nick just gave on our, you know, what the next 2 years looks like. I don't know. I mean, and I have no idea. I'm just throwing, I'm not, this isn't even quarter-baked idea, but that's pretty sobering when you see the swings and even the historic performance, you know, even before the sort of oil gas boom in the mid or the 2000s. I mean, the land board's, I think, average revenues were, you know, between 60 and 80 million dollars. Certainly correct me if I'm wrong, but then we saw the spike, and now we're, you know, seeing, you know, pretty considerable impact around minerals and such.
A couple reactions, Gary. One, the swing you're seeing in the value of the portfolio, because what's causing that swing is the value of the oil and gas, and nothing drives off the value of the oil and gas. It really doesn't matter. What would matter is, and does matter, is the swings on the revenue side, and the fact that our distribution policies are linked to the very things that swing, the oil and gas. This highlights the reasons that I think it would be in the best interest of the beneficiaries to have a distribution formula that links to the value of something stable like the permanent fund, and does it over time, like a university endowment takes a rolling 3 or 5 year average of the value of that endowment, so that you don't get the wide variations year to year in the distributions. And so I think what you're highlighting there is one of the very reasons that it's important for us to try to change the distribution policies so that they are more, the beneficiaries receive more consistent distributions from year to year.
Yeah.
So from a practical, what would it take to?
I couldn't hear the last part, Commissioner. What would it take to what?
To accomplish that.
Legislative will.
To go to a 3-year rolling, for example.
It's in the distribution policies are in statute, so it takes a change to statute.
Yeah. But you know, I'm just looking at it as, you know, with all the land that we have, it's I don't know. It's an interesting. I mean, I understand it's part of the diversification, but and land appreciates and all of that sort of stuff. But if we're looking for a more stable return, that's considerable. If that was all effectively an endowment, diversified appropriately. So, plus growth over time. I mean, you project, invest for growth. So, any questions for Nick? Okay. We have no requests for review. So we're on to our final action items. Let's see, 10 o'clock. Are people okay to take a few actions, a few more items? Okay. Our first item, Lesser Prairie Chicken Stewardship Action Plan. Tab 5 with Mindy.
Oh, hello, Commissioners. This is Mindy Gottsagen, the Conservation Services Manager. I'll be sharing my screen, and can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes. I'll be presenting this Lesser Prairie Chicken Stewardship Action Plan this morning. I just want to remind you that this Stewardship Action Plan is one of our 7 stewardship tools, and I'll be describing more about it as we proceed through the presentation. I'm asking you today to help preserve a species. This goal will also help meet our dual mission, which is sound stewardship of the resources of state trust lands, as well as helping us achieve our fiduciary responsibility as to our trust beneficiaries. The area involved with the Lesser Prairie Chicken Stewardship Action Plan involves 6 counties in southeast Colorado. All but one of these are in the Southeast District, a very small portion of Lincoln County. Lesser Prairie Chicken habitat, the original historical range, was occurred in the Southern Plains states in the counties, in the states of largely Kansas, Western Oklahoma, Northern Texas, and then parts of Eastern New Mexico and Southeast Colorado. Today, its range is just 17% of that historical range, and it's marked in those areas outlined in black. Today, that occupied range occurs in 4 different habitats that the Lesser Prairie chickens have adapted to. In Southeast Colorado, that occurs largely within the sand sage prairie, that occurs in southeastern Kansas, and then in this area of southeastern Colorado. And within these areas, the birds do not live and currently occupy most of those areas. They actually currently live only in isolated strongholds within that habitat. And I'll be talking a little bit about that and how we'll be concentrating our efforts towards those strongholds. This is the current mapping of Lesser Prairie chicken habitat in Colorado. These areas were recently remapped by Colorado Parks and Wildlife and released just in the last week or 2. This map shows the location of our state trust lands within this area. The surface lands are shown in blue, and the outline, where we have mineral ownership, is outlined in red. We happen to have twice as much surface lands as mineral ownership. I want to point that out. In this area, about 100 years ago, the State Land Board sold off much of its, it's about half of its surface ownership within what is now currently the Lesser Prairie chicken habitat. And then I want to identify and kind of just review the 3 different types of Lesser Prairie chicken subhabitat. The strongholds, most of the Lesser Prairie chickens currently live within these orange areas called focal areas. And they're called that because all our conservation efforts are mostly focused in these areas. And within these areas are Lesser Prairie chicken leks, which are their breeding grounds around which they spend most of their lives. The yellow areas are called connectivity zones. They actually connect these focal areas, and birds sometimes move between them, but they also contain transportation corridors, and for that reason don't contain prime Lesser Prairie chicken habitat. And finally, the Lesser Prairie chicken expected occupied range, that actually should be estimated occupied range, and that's the area where we would expect Lesser Prairie chickens to live. The conditions are suitable, but most of the current bird populations do not live within these green zones. And so I just want to point out that these are the 6 counties in southeastern Colorado. I'll start at the south with Baca County. Then we have much of eastern Prowers County, most of eastern Kiowa County, and then almost all of Cheyenne County and Kit Carson County. And I want to point out that this area on the northern part of Lesser Prairie chicken habitat that is on northern Cheyenne County and now going into Kit Carson County is new habitat that was drawn just with this latest set of maps released by Colorado Parks and Wildlife. And so it shows that the birds are shifting north, and we're not sure exactly why, but I want to point out that because of this, this is also the area where there's a tremendous amount of new wind energy development, and because of that, that's one of the issues that I'll be talking about later in my presentation, is this somewhat of a collision course between the upward or the northern movement of some of these habitat areas with our wind energy development. So I want to review quickly how lesser prairie chicken habitat affects some of our leases and how much of our land is within this area. We currently have 84,300 acres of lesser prairie surface acreage within all 3 of those lesser prairie chicken habitat areas. That involves 114 grazing leases, and as you may have noticed in the previous map that I showed you, most of this land occurs within our traditional checkerboard pattern. Most of these are single sections and not large properties, and most of the leases are actually single section leases. And then we have 20 CRP leases. CRP leases stand for Conservation Reserve Program leases. They're leases that our lessees have with the federal government that takes land that was formerly cropland and returns it to a natural condition. These properties are very well utilized by lesser prairie chickens. And while statewide, some of our CRP leases are now coming out of CRP production, or they're coming out of those special leases with the federal government, we're actually, all of the 20 leases in lesser prairie chicken habitat have been renewed because of their beneficial impact for the birds. We also have just under 3,000 acres of renewable energy production leases. This all occurs within wind energy. And then we have almost 5 times that amount in planning leases within lesser prairie chicken habitat. And so because of that, there'll be a kind of an impact on some of these planning leases, and I'll be talking about that and how we're hoping to mitigate that impact, both of the impact of the wind energy development on the lesser prairie chicken and how our plan will help give some assurances to our renewable energy lessees within lesser prairie chicken habitat. And as I mentioned, we have almost twice as much mineral acreage or mineral ownership within lesser prairie chicken habitat. So half of these mineral or subsurface estate doesn't have state land board ownership above it, and that presents additional problems with any leasing stipulations that we may recommend. And within this area, we have just 26 active oil and gas leases. However, until just recently, there was a tremendous amount of interest in new energy development, not just on oil and gas, but also for helium development. You may remember in January, there were hundreds of tracts nominated in Southeast Colorado, and 199 of those were located within lesser prairie chicken habitat. So this is an example of what sand sage prairie looks like. It's native sand sage prairie and then interspersed with mostly native grasses. I just wanted to talk a little bit about what happened and what are some of the causes of the reasons that lesser prairie chicken populations declined. This map just shows the period of time between the mid-1960s and just before 2020. And you can see there's been a dramatic decline in lesser prairie chicken populations. As in 2013, at the low point of this chart, CPW estimated that there were fewer than 100 lesser prairie chicken male birds located still within Colorado. Those numbers have begun to increase somewhat because of relocation, but it still just can be counted in the few hundreds. And then I wanted to show that this chart also, there's a corresponding chart with the number of leks. And I just wanted to take a minute to describe what leks are. Those are the open grounds within this sand sage prairie habitat that birds congregate in the spring as breeding grounds. And so what we know is that not only because these birds return to these stomping grounds year after year, they're very important to the birds. And they also, most of the hens raise their chicks within just a mile or two of these leks, of the lek areas. So protection of those leks is very important to the
Mindy,
bird.
the rapid decline there, like 06 to 16 or 17, what are we attributing it to?
Well, there's a number of reasons. One, there was a period of, there's some extreme weather events, especially in the early, like in 2012 and 13, but you just began to see this rapid decline because of loss of habitat with oil and gas development and just fragmentation of the habitat.
Out east? like what was causing the fragmentation? I don't, I mean, I believe this. I'm just
Yeah.
saying, like, it strikes like if this were closer to an, you know, a more dense urban environment, I might, you know, understand, it might make a little bit more sense, but I don't.
Well, I'm going to be going through
Yeah.
some of those reasons. We
Okay,
also have available Karen Voltora from CPW to answer any questions at the end.
okay,
So
all right.
we'll ask her that question if she can speak more to that.
Okay.
Okay. So one of those reasons is conversion to cropland. Again, because the cropland is altered and changed, that's one reason for the loss of habitat. Another is the removal of sand sage for grazing. This is a picture of state trust land down near the Comanche grasslands. As you know, or as you may remember, much of these lands were part of the Dust Bowl in the 1930s, and the recovery of those lands has been very slow indeed. We also have drought and extreme weather events. This is a picture of our property during the 2012 and 13 drought. So even though the sand shades is there, there's just virtually no food and no cover for the lesser prairie chicken. Again, mineral development has been impacting lesser prairie chickens habitat, less so in Colorado than in other states, but it has been responsible for contributing to the overall population decline. And as I pointed out earlier, there's increasing demand, at least until recently, for oil and gas development in Southeast Colorado. And then more new is renewable energy development that's occurring within lesser prairie chicken habitat. Because lesser prairie chickens evolved over a wide open landscape, they naturally avoid high structures on which predators may perch. And while predators will not perch, obviously, on the wind towers themselves, there's a lot of associated development with energy development that they would perch on. And again, the chickens just naturally avoid tall structures. So with that, I want to talk a little bit about what the stewardship action plans recommended are. Again, stewardship action plans is one of our stewardship tools, and it's a tool that we use to address board leasing decisions and stipulations across a broad landscape for particular species or an ecosystem. We have one other stewardship action plan, and that's for greater sage grouse that the board adopted 4 years ago in Northwest Colorado. So one of the goals of the stewardship action plan is to align with other agencies. The range-wide plan for lesser prairie chickens was developed by the Western Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies, called WAFWA. And that was a plan for the species across those 5 states, and each of the 5 states, Parks and Wildlife departments or organizations supported that plan. And we're also aligning with Colorado Parks and Wildlife recommendations and the new 1200 series rules that will address oil and gas and in some cases mitigation. So our efforts are aligning with both of these agencies to help protect the lesser prairie chicken. The overall strategy of both of those plans is to protect the core habitat. Again, I identified those areas. On this map, it's the orange core focal areas, and within these areas are LECs. We have an agreement with a non-disclosure agreement with Parks and Wildlife to not show the location of those LECs. And although new information was just released last week by Parks and Wildlife that shows a portion of those LECs that's now available to the public. So again, that core habitat is most of the attention will be focused on LECs. This picture on the map that shows the yellow 1 square mile, this is a section that has a LEC on it. And again, it just, these dots show the results of a radio transponder of a hen over a period of, during the lecking season or during the brood rearing season. And you can show just how closely associated they are with those LECs. Their movement doesn't really stray that far. And that's why our highest protections are given to those properties that have LECs on or near them. And then secondary, most of our highest protections are also given toward the focal areas. So again, these are going to be these orange areas, and within the orange areas, all current LECs are located. At the current time, there's only 27, so it's not like there's hundreds of LECs located within the state. And again, not all of those are even located on or near state trust land. So the Lesser Prairie Chicken Stewardship Action Plan is organized around 3 primary goals. The first of those is resource conservation. And what that means is, how are we going to protect the habitat? How are we going to improve the properties that aren't where they could be? And how do we identify the ones that are already having a high function? Secondly is resource development. And this means, how are we going to be developing our resources with oil and gas, solid minerals, and our wind and energy development? And secondly, how are we going to work with our lessees, reach out to them, and work together to improve lesser prairie chicken habitat? So that first goal, resource conservation, is focused on, again, protecting and enhancing lesser prairie chicken habitat. We'll be assessing all state trust lands over the course of the next 2 years. That's just the surface ownership. That's about 84,000 acres, about 114 parcels. We'll be identifying opportunities for us enhancing. This background picture shows one example of the little clips that are added to fence marking to help birds identify them so they don't hit the cross wires. And finally, we'll be preparing or conducting a LEC survey next spring to identify where active LECs are on state trust lands. CPW currently does LEC surveys every spring, but they don't necessarily hit all of our lands. And in order to give our lessees more assurances of knowing where LECs are or where they're not, we would arrange with CPW to conduct LEC surveys next spring, so that survey will stand for a period of 5 years, that we'll know whether or not there are LECs or not, and whether any of these leasing recommendations or guidance or the guidelines need to apply. The second goal is resource development. This is how we'll be leasing our lands within lesser prairie chicken habitat. The first thing that we're going to require is early consultation with CPW. Now, this is something that we normally do as part of an oil and gas leasing review process. We engage with CPW early to know whether there's any concerns, and we include a stipulation in those oil and gas leases that they need to consult with CPW. But that's not the case with many of our other lines of business. So we'll be asking all of our lessees, and that's our mostly renewable energy lessees, oil and gas, solid minerals, and rights of way, to consult early with CPW so they can help give guidance on how to avoid and minimize any impact on lesser prairie chicken habitat. And then we'll be implementing or recommending leasing recommendations and stipulations. These are outlined in the Stewardship Action Plan that was attached to your packet and that you've read. I'm not going to be going into detail on those leasing recommendations and stipulations, but we've taken a set of 7 basic recommendations that CPW has developed for lesser prairie chicken habitat and adapted them for 4 lines of business. That is oil and gas, renewable energy, solid mineral, and rights of way, and applied those as appropriate. And again, those are focused mostly on new leases within the focal areas and to some degree connectivity zones. And finally, we've asked for permanent adverse impacts. So to the degree that that impacts cannot be avoided or minimized, and they are permanent, we've asked that our lessees work with Colorado Parks and Wildlife to identify other projects that can be used to offset permanent adverse impacts just in LECs and focal areas. There is no current existing mitigation program, so this would occur on a one-off or an ad hoc basis with CPW. And finally, our third goal is to reach out to our lessees and engage them. We had a public meeting and have received comments. We have a letter was received yesterday from the wind energy from one of our lessees with comments, and I can address those later. We'll be assessing lesser prairie chicken habitat on state trust lands, and then collaborating with our lessees on how we can improve habitat. And finally, each year we'll, as part of our adaptive management plan, we'll be presenting an annual report to the board that shows leasing activity, leases that were approved with stipulations or possibly withheld from leasing, assessment of state trust lands, and any enhancement projects that have been started or completed, any compensatory mitigation actions that might have been implemented, what the financial impact is to our agency's revenue, and finally, any changes that we may recommend based on on each year's learnings. So finally, the staff recommendation is that the board approve the Lesser Prairie Chicken Stewardship Action Plan for a period of 5 years. Staff will review the results of implementing the plan each year, and then ask the board to review a decision to continue or cease efforts in 2025. I just wanted to address before when our renewable energy leasing partners' concerns, and point out that the Lesser Prairie Chicken Stewardship Action Plan is really designed to provide increased assurances with planning renewable energy projects. One, by involving early consultation with CPW, will enable better planning rather than having that happen late in the process when millions of dollars may have already been spent on site planning. And by identifying LECs ahead of time, we'll save, we'll know which properties involve any restrictions or not. And so we're hoping to streamline that planning process. And finally, I just wanted to point out that our leasing recommendations don't preclude development on LECs. We're asking the board that wherever possible that we avoid leasing or approving energy development where active LECs are, but it does allow development to happen with additional stipulations, and then finally mitigation that would be possibly involved for any permanent adverse impacts. And with that, that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mindy. Commissioners, any initial questions or comments? I have a question. Like, how does this compare to like the Gunnison sage grouse or that? Like that seemed to generate considerable acrimony with portions of the public. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of outcry, public outcry on this. Can you compare the two, or is it just totally apples and oranges?
Well, they're not apples and oranges. They're somewhat similar. They both, most of the recommendations, the leasing recommendations, are geared toward energy development that's occurring within Lesser Prairie chicken habitat. Neither plan really recommends leasing changes to grazing and to recreation. But I think because of a lot of the concern of what was happening across the landscape up in Northwest Colorado for greater sage grouse, there was just a lot more uncertainty. What's happened is that there has not been a lot of energy development happening up in Northwest Colorado. And so we actually haven't even had leasing decisions that have come into play up in Northwest Colorado. So, in the same case, we most of the impact here, I'm guessing, is really going to be with renewable energy development and oil and gas development. And while we know that there will be some impacts to some of the properties that are within LEC areas, we're hoping that the advanced planning that we're doing and the early consultation will really avoid some of these last minute uncertainty about whether there's going to be, whether there'll be wind towers able to be placed, or the number of oil and gas pads placed within habitat.
Yeah.
Mindy, were you going to have somebody address Commissioner Butterworth's earlier question?
Yes. Nick, are you able to advance Karen Voltura as a speaking position?
I think he's got that taken care of.
Okay, great. Thanks, Karen.
Hi, Karen.
Good morning. I'm Karen Voltura. I work for Colorado Parks and Wildlife, and I'm the Energy and Land Use Specialist for the Southeast region. So I think I spoke to you about the Red Canyon project a few months ago. So Mindy had asked me to kind of just answer any questions. And to the earlier question on sort of those population trends, one thing to keep in mind too is the map that, or the numbers that Mindy showed were for that sand sage subregion. So that does include parts of Kansas as well as New Mexico. So
Oh.
development going on there may have impacted them as well. The other thing to remember, she mentioned Lex a little bit, that a group of males will go to elect and sort of attract females. Grouse in general, and including lesser prairie chicken, have a lot of variation around the mean for these populations, and their populations can swing with climate changes, with these droughts, with one of the big issues in southeastern Colorado was the blizzard around 2006, 2007 that took a lot out. And when you have a stable population at fairly high levels, you can adjust to those big drops and big increases. But the lower your numbers get, the less likely they are to rebound from those impacts. So it's a combination of their general downward trend, and then you have these devastating impacts that they just take longer to bounce back from. So it was, and again, the changes on the landscape are in part, oil and gas. Kansas was having a lot more turbines before, before Colorado was seeing them in that area. But it really is a combination of these populations dropping from habitat loss combined with these, drops that they just can't recover from. And that's really where that big drop was.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Makes sense.
Gary?
Yeah, Commissioner Heath.
Well, I guess this is for either Mindy or Karen. Did you say there are like 37 LECs in the state of Colorado? Is that what you, and that how many of those would be like on state land?
I think the number's 27 active. And what we do is we map them, and then if they're active with birds on them within the last 5 years, that's where we try to put most of our protections. So some that we may see on the map that haven't been active in more than 10 years become historic and sort of drop off from the protection requests. So I think we don't quite have all of the 2020 survey data done, but it's somewhere between 20 and 27, I believe, state that have been active in the last 5 years. But Mindy, I don't know if any of those we've identified have been on state land board properties.
Based on the map that I've seen, there are at least 3.
Okay.
So, and then Commissioner Heath, around each LEC, so there's not just the point of each LEC, but there are these 2 critical buffers. One is 1.25 miles and one is 2.2. And so some of those outer edges also come onto state trust land. But within, so we have currently 84,000 acres of state trust lands in lesser prairie chicken habitat, and about 4,600, so 4,600 has at least a little piece of it within 2.2 miles. So, and then that's one reason we want to do updated surveys on state trust lands to see if we can exclude some of those areas or if there are any others that may impact. And that will give us a much better starting point for knowing exactly which leases would be affected or which properties would be affected by some of these restrictions. And we have to hope to have that completed by next June.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Nick will offer it up to members of the public who wish to make a comment on this issue. Hit your raise hand button and we'll work to get you activated.
Not seeing any hands, Commissioner.
Okay. Any further discussion or comment from commissioners? If not, I would entertain a motion to accept the 2020 Lesser Prairie Chicken Stewardship Action Plan as presented.
So after consideration of the materials presented and testimony given in our regular meeting on June 10th, 2020, we determine as a board that it's in the best interest of the trust to adopt the Lesser Prairie Chicken Stewardship Action Plan as presented by staff. The results of implementing the plan will be reviewed by our board each year, and a decision to continue or cease efforts under the plan will be made by the board in 5 years. We delegate authority to the director to draft an order and take appropriate action consistent with the board's decision.
It's been moved by Commissioner Heath. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Carney. Any further discussion? I'll take a roll call vote. If in favor of the motion, indicate by saying aye. Commissioner Shaw,
Aye.
Commissioner Carney, Commissioner Heath,
Aye.
Commissioner Scanlon,
Aye.
and the chair votes in favor. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Mindy.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Everyone good to keep moving? Head nods, okay. Item 3B, Lowry Ranch Management and Enhancement Account request. Tab 6, Lindsay, welcome. You're on mute.
Hello, Commissioners. Good morning.
Morning.
Are you
I
going
will,
video free too?
I will share my screen.
Okay.
All right, can you see my presentation?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Good morning. For the record, this is Lindsay Brandt, the Stewardship Trust Manager. I'm here to talk about the Lowry Ranch Management and Enhancement Fund, which is an action item. In short, we have the opportunity to advance our stewardship portion of our mission at the Lowry Ranch. Just a little background. As you know, the Lowry Ranch is in Arapahoe County and it is about 26,000 acres. It's located just east of Aurora Reservoir in the Arapahoe County Fairgrounds. And the majority of the ranch, about 21,000 acres, is in the Stewardship Trust. In 2012, the board approved a lease on Lowry Ranch to ConocoPhillips for oil and gas development. At that time, knowing that the property was in the Stewardship Trust, the board was very concerned about maintaining the importance of continuing our stewardship responsibilities at Lowry. And so to facilitate that, they took $3.5 million from the bonus payment that ConocoPhillips paid and put it into a special account to fund stewardship projects at Lowry. This is what we call the Lowry Ranch Management Enhancement Account. At the same time, the board created a committee, the Lowry Ranch Stewardship Advisory Committee, which is a volunteer committee made up of 6 people with expertise in land conservation, range land and grazing management, local government, wildlife, education, and ecosystem services. And the purposes of the committee is to make recommendations and approve funding for restoration, maintenance, and enhancement projects on Lowry Ranch. And the current balance on our account is $3.6 million. So in 2018, the board approved the use of $132,000 of this account for 7 stewardship projects. Most of this work was not completed, mainly because my position was vacant, just didn't get done. And since board approval only lasts 2 years, I'm back to ask for reauthorization of these funds, plus an additional $50,000 to supplement one of the projects and implement one new project. So what are these 8 stewardship projects? The first project is a livestock well. The purpose of adding an additional livestock well at Lowry is to enable our grazing lessee to utilize areas of the ranch that currently don't have good water access. This will enable him to enhance his rotational grazing program and provide additional areas where he can graze, which would then allow additional rest time for other portions of the ranch. So in 2018, the board had approved $25,000 to drill this well. Since that time, the costs for drilling wells have gone up. There's been some new casing rules put in place. And we also think that this is going to need to be a deeper well than what we've been drilled in the past. So we're asking for an additional $25,000 for a total of $50,000. The second project is repair or replacement of a boundary fence on the southwest side of the ranch. We're having some trespass issues in this area, which is causing some resource damage. And occasionally cattle have also gotten out onto the roadway, which is obviously a hazard. So improving or replacing the fence will prevent these issues from going on. This project has been on hold mainly because there's actually some development happening on the opposite side of the fence, and we're waiting for them to finish that project before we figure out exactly where the fence is going to go and if the developer might actually participate in getting this fence installed.
Lindsay, what type of trespass are we getting? Inadvertent or intentional? Do you know?
I think possibly intentional, but unaware. People see what looks like open space or they see that it's owned by the state and they make the assumption that they can use it. Also knowing that we do have multiple recreation leases on that ranch, for specific groups that are actually privately held recreation leases, people see that activity going on and assume that it might apply to them.
Okay, thanks.
Lindsay, correct me if I'm wrong, but Gary, recall also that there's some really dense subdivisions being built right on our southwest border.
Yeah, okay.
And so suddenly there are a whole lot of people down there.
Got it. Yeah.
Looking out into a wonderful green space. The next stewardship project is bird escape ramps. So the board approved $5,000 in 2018 to install bird escape ramps in all the livestock tanks on the ranch. This is what a bird escape ramp looks like. Basically, the purpose is, while we're providing water for the livestock at Lowry, that water also attracts other animals and birds that come to drink, and frequently smaller mammals and birds will end up falling in the tank and drowning. These ramps basically enable these animals to climb out of the tank if they fall in, and it's generally a good best management practice to have these in all livestock tanks. About half of them have been installed already, and so we have about $2,600 remaining to spend on additional ramps once they become available from the manufacturer. The prairie dog mapping and management. As part of the Lowry Prairie Dog Plan, one of the goals of that plan is to better map our active colonies, to understand their impact on forage and their role in the Lowry ecosystem as a whole, as well as doing prairie dog control in the exclusion zones that have been set up. For most of Lowry, they are allowed to function sort of naturally without any control efforts, but around the perimeter in these established exclusion zones, we have been doing prairie dog control in the past. The board approved $10,000 a year for 3 years in 2018. That was not used in 18 or 19 because we did not have any dogs in the exclusion zone, and ConocoPhillips' as contractor did some mapping for us, but we're not necessarily sure that situation is going to continue, so we are requesting these funds again. The next is the Tallgrass Prairie Seed Collection and Revegetation Project. We would like to collect some seed from the tallgrass prairie species to be used in revegetation of areas of the ranch that have been disturbed. We would like to obtain some local seed, as most of the commercially available seed is grown on a seed farm out of state and is not always ideally suited to the local climate. This project was initiated in 2018 with a group called the Wildlands Restoration Volunteers, but it kind of stalled out both because my position was vacant and also the Wildland Restoration Volunteer staff turned over. We will probably pursue this project in the future, either with a contractor or with a volunteer group. Weed management, as you know, ongoing noxious weed management is always an important part of good stewardship. These funds were approved in 2018, $10,000 a year for 3 years, and we would like to continue to do that work. Next, a risk management plan. So when the holistic grazing lease at Lowry was implemented, the board indicated that this property would be a test bed for kind of new and innovative grazing management practices on state trust lands. So as part of our stewardship mission, we have been sort of sharing the lessons, or if you will, the gospel of holistic grazing practices with other lessees and other grazing practitioners. And we've had several workshops and tours hosted on Lowry about this topic. the members of the advisory committee pointed out that if we're having groups out to the property on a regular basis, we really ought to have a risk management plan in place in the event of a medical emergency or a fire or some other kind of thing, especially if this group involves school children. A risk management plan would simply identify the risks and help develop mitigation strategies for those risks. And we think this can be completed by a contractor relatively easily. Finally, a new request is for $25,000 to fund academic and professional studies on the ranch. Again, as this property is a test site for the holistic grazing model, we want to understand how that practice is impacting the health of the rangeland and also the Lowry ecosystem as a whole. It's also one of our goals, and as part of the Lowry Asset Management Plan, to develop partnerships with academic institutions and other researchers that can enable us to gather some of this meaningful information about what changes are occurring on the ground at Lowry as a result of our management approach. For example, how has the grassland bird population changed since these holistic grazing practices began? What are the conditions of the plant community or the soil condition ongoing as this holistic grazing is taking place? So having these funds approved by the board will enable us to sort of seize these opportunities as they arise, to develop partnerships with CSU and other agencies to do these types of studies. Based on our kind of current purchasing policies, we can spend this money relatively easily in up to $5,000 increments. So our approach is going to be spending it in those $5,000 increments up to $25,000, but we're not necessarily going to use the $25,000 if we don't have good projects or good partnerships in place in order to do that. These next two slides are basically to issue a correction to Exhibit 2 in your cover sheet. That exhibit was incorrect and not completed. So basically the purpose was to show you what projects have been approved by the advisory committee in the past and also currently, and give you a sense of the evaluation criteria that the committee uses when approving these projects. So these are projects that have been completed in the past. And this slide shows the current projects for which we're requesting funding.
Can you go back a slide?
Sure.
So to date, about 120,000-ish of previous projects?
Yeah, I believe the other exhibit in your cover sheet has a total for that, but I think it's in that area, yes.
All right.
Are you okay for me to move forward?
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
No worries. So finally, the staff recommendation is that the board approve the use of up to $179,660 from the Lowry Ranch Management and Enhancement account to fund the 8 projects described in this presentation and in your cover sheet. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions or hear any comments you have.
Thank you, Lindsay. Any questions for Lindsay? This might be a question, either Lindsay, Greg, Bill, Nick. So is this account, like, this is a separate account? And is it just, I mean, it started at 3.5 and we're at 3.6. So imagine it's just drawing interest. Is that?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I can start an answer and then others may want to jump in. When we originally created the fund, we had anticipated, it's a little like the permanent fund, investing it in some sort of higher yielding assets. And it turned out under state rules, all we can do is put it in basically a passbook savings checking account kind of a thing.
Okay.
So it's earned much less than we anticipated, although we've still managed to grow it a little bit.
Well, and I imagine the idea was it necessarily to like effectively create an endowment?
In a sense, I think in a sense it was. Originally the goal was we would only spend the interest from the account, and we thought that was going to be a couple $100,000 a year. It hasn't worked, and previous boards have agreed to spend part of the principal to get projects accomplished. I mean, so far it's done, I think, it's done most of what we hoped it would accomplish, just on a more modest scale.
Yeah. Okay.
Commissioner Butterworth, though, you're raising a couple points. So this isn't out of our revenues or general fund dollars. We specifically took this money from what Conoco paid us at the beginning and set it aside for this purpose, just to make sure that we were being great stewards with what is arguably our most valuable asset.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions or comments from commissioners before I seek public comment? All right. Are there any members of the public who wish to make comment? If so, you should have a raise hand button on your screen. If you would like to, please click that button. Nothing?
No hands or comments.
Seeing no public comment, if there's no further discussion, I would entertain a motion to approve the board order.
I move to approve the board order as presented in the packet.
For the Lowry Ranch Management and Enhancement Account funding requests. All right. Is there a second? That was Commissioner Carney with the motion.
A second.
Second by Commissioner Scanlon. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, I'll take a roll call vote. Those in favor indicate by saying aye. Commissioner Shaw. I see him say aye, but he's on mute. For the record, just John, yeah.
Aye.
Okay. Commissioner Carney, thank you.
Aye.
Commissioner Heath,
Aye.
Commissioner Scanlon,
Aye.
and I vote in favor. Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you very much, commissioners.
Yes, thank you, Lindsay. Everyone good to keep? We sort of got about maybe a half an hour or so more. We're good?
Yes.
Everyone okay? Item 3C, Wallace Ditch Right of Way in Bent County. I believe that's Mr. Pollard. Welcome.
Thank you. Is it showing up, commissioners?
It's the Zoom screen is.
We see your desktop, so open your PowerPoint, please. I'm going to request.
Well, I have had some issues here today. I'm sorry. I having some trouble getting my PowerPoint up.
There you
There
go.
we go.
You got it, Mike.
Can you pull it up? Okay, perfect. Now you can control your computer again.
Thanks, Tracy.
Good morning, commissioners. I'm Mike Pollard, Southeast District Manager. I'm here to talk to you today about a right-of-way in Bent County, Colorado. This will be will require an action. I will give you a summary and a brief background. I'm going to ask the board to create a legal right-of-way to protect the school trust lands for this pipeline project. This is the subject property in Bent County, just right south of the town of Los Animas. In March of 2020, we received a request to install a pipeline in an existing ditch that crossed the state trust land to deliver irrigation water. Working with staff, we discovered that there had never been a right-of-way issued for this ditch. And so we went to work on the process of trying to find how this happened. And we discovered that this ditch now is known as the Los Animas Consolidated Ditch Company, and it was formed in the early 1900s, I believe maybe 1905. But before it was formed, it was previously known as the Jones Ditch. And Mr. Wallace presented documentation that showed that this Jones Ditch had been delivering water to the state trust land since about 1878, or about the time that we received this land. So the existing ditch is basically 145 years old. The footprint of this ditch is about 2.3 acres. There will be no new impact to the state trust land, but the Jones Ditch was delivering water to 2 diversion laterals that cross the state trust land. The first one belongs to our current lessee, Mr. Mike Spady. The other one belongs to Mr. Wallace. You can see on this slide is the pattern that these ditches follow parallel to each other, and sometimes within 20 feet of each other. When we reach the point up at this point here, Mr. Wallace's ditch, or Mr. Spady's ditch, then turns off and continues to irrigate other portions of this state parcel. Mr. Wallace's goes ahead and exits and goes to his private property. Now this pipeline will make it consistent with the historic use. It will eliminate a surface encumbrance that would help with the grazing and the wildlife on it. The historic ditch is well managed. The State Land Board minimum right-of-way charge for this ditch would be approximately $10,305. The right-of-way establishes a legal boundary for crossing this. We would like that this be allowed for a water pipeline only, and being the time frame that it has been across this state parcel, that we would propose a charge of nothing and make it for a perpetual term. We would ask the board to give the staff authority to complete negotiations and develop a contract for this perpetual right-of-way in Benton County, and the fee will be for no money. That pretty much is the project. I will now take any question.
Thanks, Mike. Any questions?
How long is the right-of-way?
Approximately 5,000 feet.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions for Mike? Comments? Members of the public in the audience, attendees, if you have a comment or a question, now would be the time, and if so, just raise your hand.
Not seeing any, Commissioner.
Okay. If there's no further discussion, I would entertain a motion.
This is Commissioner Scan. I move that the staff complete negotiations with Mr. Wallace and develop a contract for a perpetual right-of-way as presented in our packet regarding the Wallace Ditch right-of-way in Benton County.
Second.
Moved to approve the board order as presented. It was moved by Commissioner Scanlon, second by Commissioner Carney. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Take a roll call vote. Those in favor indicate by saying aye. Commissioner Shaw.
Aye.
Commissioner Carney.
Aye.
Commissioner Heath.
Aye.
Commissioner Scanlon.
Aye.
And the chair votes in favor. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, commissioners.
Next item, 3D. Request for staff authority spending on life and safety issues, and that's Nick.
Thank you, Commissioner. Folks, in your packet, you've got a memo requesting the authority to spend proactively on emergency issues. I don't have a presentation prepared for this one. The memo is pretty thorough. This was in response to some good questions from Commissioner Heath a couple months back when we had the septic system concern on one of the properties. I'll point out that the numbers, the dollars included in the request are sort of derived from what we think typical projects might cost. They seem sufficient. Spending the authority is probably directed at something like the most immediate response, where we would have additional time to ask for additional funds if we need them. I will also point out that because the potential exists that an emergency might happen on a trust asset that is not part of school trust, we can't necessarily spend IND funds or commit the memo to spending IND funds on the project. So I've left it fairly general in the request and give assurances that we'll report out which fund monies came from as needed.
So Nick,
Call this the
go ahead.
Memorial Urgent Septic System Replacement Motion.
Memorial would be great.
So Nick, like if it was from one of the other trust assets, where would the dollars come from? Just
we have the opportunity to spend funds from kind of base budget that would be able to address those needs. And we'd come back to the board with a note on what happened.
Okay. All right. Any questions for Nick? Okay. Any members of the public who wish to make comment? If so, raise your hand. Click the raise your hand button.
Not seeing any.
Appear to be any public comment. Given that, no further conversation, would entertain a motion.
After consideration of materials presented and testimony given at its regular meeting of June 10th, 2020, the board determines that it's in the best interest of the trust to approve an authorization for staff to spend up to $30,000 per occurrence, not to exceed $100,000 annually, to respond to concerns of the life, health, and/or safety of authorized users of the state trust assets, including lessee, staff, and the public, or delegates the authority of the director to draft an order and take appropriate action consistent with the board's decision.
Great, thank you. Been moved by Commissioner Shaw.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Heath. Any further discussion? All right, we'll take vote by roll call. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Commissioner Shaw. Commissioner Shaw votes aye. Commissioner Carney.
Aye.
Commissioner Heath.
Aye.
Commissioner Scanlon.
Aye.
And I vote in favor. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Nick.
Commissioner Heath, thank you for the good suggestion. This is an obvious ad that we should have had years ago, and so thank you.
Yeah, great. Okay, next item 3E, solar production application, tab 9. Have David Rodenberg and Christopher Smith.
Give us a minute to bring those guys up. There we go. And Chris, unmute yourself from your end. David, unmute yourself from your end, if you would, please.
Hello, commissioners.
Morning.
Good morning. Everybody see that okay?
Yep.
Yes.
So good morning, commissioners. David Rodenberg, real estate section. This final action item is to recommend that the board approve a utility scale solar production lease with Thunderwolf Energy Center LLC on 9 sections of state trust land consisting of approximately 2,313 acres in Pueblo County. This is the first utility scale solar production lease that is being brought to the board for review and recommendation for approval. If the board approves this production lease, this lease will significantly contribute to the board's revenue generating goals, which I will discuss just in a little bit. I'd also like to pause on this picture to just for a second to acknowledge the amazing photography that's in place here. Okay. So Colorado has approximately 1,200 megawatts of installed solar energy. The State Land Board has approximately 18 megawatts of those 1,200 megawatts. And Colorado has a goal to be 100% renewable energy by 2040. State Land Board has a strategic plan goal to increase renewable energy leasing on state trust land. So all of our goals are aligned here with the current administration and the State Land Board. I also want to just, for context, let the board know that from a calculation standpoint, if you will, that 1 megawatt provides enough electricity for about 300 homes. So the solar production application, the project, is located in Pueblo County, just east and slightly south of the city of Pueblo, located approximately right here. So the parcels identified in orange on this slide, which is where the project is located, they're currently under a planning lease and have been since 2017. That's all these orange parcels that you see here. That planning lease has earned the school trust approximately $294,000 at $50 an acre in revenue during the 3-year term of the lease. So I just wanted to go over the board's renewable energy leasing process. You've heard this several times, but just as a reminder, the State Land Board's renewable energy leasing process consists of 3 main phases. The first step is the pre-application review, which consists of a line of business review, agricultural lease notification, and the potential need for board approval prior to going to a planning lease if there are any objections from our agricultural lessees. The next step is a planning lease, which is generally approved by staff, except when agricultural lessees object to the project. And then the third step is a production lease. All renewable energy production leases require board approval, which is why we are here today for this particular project. So Thunderwolf Energy Center LLC is a limited liability company wholly owned by NextEra Energy Resources LLC. The board has 10 wind production leases and 5 wind planning leases with NextEra, And the board also has 5 solar planning leases for utility scale type projects with NextEra, one of which is related to this project known as the Thunder Wolf project. So the Thunder Wolf project consists of 2,313 acres, which is why it's considered a utility scale solar project. That project will produce 200 megawatts of solar energy and have 100 megawatts of solar storage. And most importantly, the proposed project will be entirely on state trust land if the board approves the project today. So early this year in February at the board meeting, the board had a workshop where staff discussed the board's solar portfolio and the board's renewable energy leasing process. NextEra was a presenter at that meeting and talked about their siting process and specifically discussed this potential project. The red outline that you see here on the map consists of the project boundary and confine the parcels that are proposed to be in the project. So NextEra is at that part in the process where board review and decision is required in order to move forward with a production lease. Again, that project area consists of 2,313 acres. The areas that you see here shaded in blue would be the proposed solar array across these sections of land. It approximately looks something like this. In addition, staff wanted to point out, separate from this project, sort of, Xcel Energy has had a planning lease since 2017 for a potential switchyard to be located in the donut hole of this area that equates to 320 acres. This area right here are those 320 acres. So those are under a separate planning lease with Xcel.
David, that's your red dot moving there in the...
Yep, right here.
I got it. Got it. Thank you.
So David, what's the status of that?
Good question. Well, that's sort of my next point I was going to make. Staff had, and Xcel has proposed a potential land swap for that land. Xcel owns land in the immediate area that they would want to swap with us. I believe it's just east of the property, located in here. Staff had anticipated bringing this to the board first, but due to the required fine tuning of the amount of acres that they actually need and want to swap, and the required appraisals necessary, which we're in the process of getting right now, the land swap proposal will not come to the board until July or August. And it was essential that we came to the board with this production lease from a timing perspective for NextEra for their project.
Commissioner Heath, this is Christopher Smith, the real estate section manager. We got word from the appraiser yesterday that they will be done in early July. So we anticipate this coming to the board in the August board meeting.
Commissioner Heath, it's imminent. It's going to happen. They need to put a switching station there to handle all this power. So
okay, thank you.
We're just working out the details, and you'll see it in the next 30 to 60 days.
Thank you.
So in addition to that, I just wanted to point out, so Xcel, NextEra, and staff have worked together to determine locations of the proposed access and transmission line corridors that are necessary to access the switchyard above and beyond this NextEra project. These proposed corridors will be required as part of the proposed land swap, which we brought to you in the next month or two. These corridors are these areas here. They're on either side of the switchyard. So there's one here. There'd be a corridor here, here, and here. And those will allow additional renewable energy projects to be fed into the switchyard. So the proposed terms of this lease consist of a 32.5-year term, which includes 2.5-year construction period and a 30-year production period that will produce a total estimated revenue of approximately $36 million over the course of the life of this lease. The estimated total revenue includes one-time bonus payments, which consists of one-time payments, which consists of a bonus payment of $300,000 and an additional construction period payment of $289,000, which equates to the total $589,000 that you see here. And then more importantly, the total production rent revenue estimation is approximately $35,300,000. Staff has researched these types of leases and determined that the board will receive market rate or better based on these terms. In addition, the annual rent will be reviewed and adjusted every 5 years to the greater of the current rent or a percentage of gross revenue. And that escalates every 5 years for the first 5 years, and then every 10 years after that from 4%, 5%, and 6% of gross revenue. It's a way of assuring that we're participating in the project if the gross production increases significantly. Because we're basing all of our projections and our production rent on estimates thus far. So in years 5 and years 10 and years 15, we'll see actual numbers and we can adjust the rent accordingly. So the proposed project will affect 2 agricultural leases. The project was discussed with both lessees and both responded in writing that they did not object to the project. Those 2 lessees are Douglas Thacker and Danny J. Heinrichs. So the acres that are in the project, the total acres in the lease are 2,219 acres and 909 acres respectively. The acres in the project would be 1,871 and 442. There's also 1 mineral lease that's affected by this project, and NextEra has been communicating with our mineral lessee, Fremont Paving and Ready Mix, about the project, and they've been collaborating and working together to make sure that this project will not affect the mining operation. So I'd like to now invite our South Central District Manager, Justin Osborne, to talk about the rangeland conditions and agricultural use on the parcels.
Good morning, Commissioners. This is Justin Osborne. Can everyone hear me? Okay.
Yes.
All right. As David mentioned, he contacted me earlier this week and wanted me to just address the 3 bullets you see on the screen here. First off, with the rangeland quality, from an ecological site description, these range sites range from gravel breaks, which is obviously why Fremont Paving has a lease with us, to more of a silt loam soil quality. The average production per acre, just for your information, is averaging about 750 pounds per acre, which is relatively low for forage production. Recently, South Central District, we put together a soil survey analysis of a lot of the different areas where we have leases, planning leases for solar sites. And actually this site that we're talking about today came in second lowest as far as the amount of forage produced on those sites. Most all of the forage available is your typical short grass prairie grasses that are present, blue grama, some of the lesser quality grasses like guyetta and so forth. So anyway, just wanted to make that known that this is one of our lower quality sites as far as the actual production. So with that, it takes more acres to run 1 AUM. So in other words, for instance, Mr. Thacker's lease is rated at about 5 acres per AUM. So overall, it would take about 60 acres to run 1 cow for a year. Mr. Henrich's lease is very similar. So those are the AUM ratings. So both lessees, grazing lessees, are on board with this solar production lease. And the final thing that I've got up there as far as the bullet is the drought conditions. I know we mentioned this earlier in the meeting. You guys had a discussion. I was listening in. I looked it up earlier today, and according to the drought monitor, this area right in here is classified as severe drought right now. So with the DM discretion as far as drought reductions, as far as AUMs, this would be an area, if they were to bring that forward, and given the conditions that we're having around southeastern Colorado, in particular south of Pueblo, where this is located, this would be something that probably would be reduced as far as the AUMs. So we would see a reduction in revenue from the ag stream as well. So I just wanted to make that point. Before I turn it back over to David, is there any questions related to the range conditions in the area?
Sounds pretty bleak.
Yeah, it's kind of bleak right now.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Justin.
Yep.
Justin. So as mentioned earlier, this proposed utility scale solar project would be the first on state trust land. The applicant is a company that we know based on experience and is reliable and committed to successful renewable energy projects in Colorado. The Thunderwolf project, some project benefits, it will generate significant revenue for the school trust, as indicated just a few minutes ago. The project supports the board's goals of increasing renewable energy on state trust land. And finally, this is the best use of the land considering the range land condition and revenue to be generated. In addition, the State Land Board lines of business provided supportive feedback for the project during their review process. Local land use regulations will be followed by the lessee, and best management practices will be established in the lease as typical with our renewable energy leases based on the environmental studies and feedback from local, state, and federal entities. I also wanted to note that the project has been in front of the Pueblo County Commissioners for review a week ago. The Pueblo County Commissioners has extended the decision for 2 weeks to address some concerns that were brought up from adjacent landowners and others in the community.
What kinds of concerns were raised, David?
It's a good question. I mean, the distinctive one that I heard about was just land value, and some of the adjacent landowners were concerned about the shadows created by the wind turbines. Those are the two key things that I'm aware of. Nextera there are some people from Nextera here that were at the hearing, and they could certainly speak more of that if you'd like them to talk about that at the end here.
Would you like to hear from them, Commissioner Heath?
Well, I just wondered if the Pueblo County Commissioners have extended the decision time to work out those differences, or what was the purpose of the extension?
Yeah, I believe they wanted to collect some more information from Nextera on some of the issues that were raised. I think it'd be a good idea to have someone from Nextera speak more on that.
Sure.
Okay. And commissioners, if you want to have that input at this point, we'll just ask those folks to raise their hand and we can allow them to talk.
Thank you.
Yeah, a formal invitation for representatives from Nextera. David, do you know by name who they are?
Yes, it would be Jennifer Heron and Nate Smith.
Okay. Do we see them? I don't see them.
Oh, we got Nathan Kaiser.
Yeah, sorry, Nate Kaiser. Yep.
Okay.
And Tricia Hale. Raising hands.
Okay, great. Did they raise their hand?
Yep.
Awesome.
And we made them as panelists.
David, do you mind if we just hear from them?
That'd be great.
Yeah. So Nathan, I'm not sure if you want to take the lead, or Tricia.
So guys, this is Nathan. Good afternoon, everybody. David, can you just clarify a little bit, please? Are you referring to the extension in Logan County for the Nile project?
Oh, yes. I apologize. My mistake. I got the projects mixed up. That was the county extension was referring to the project in Logan County. My apologies.
You'll merge.
So has this been before the Pueblo County Commissioners already?
No, the project has not. We're actually in the process of submitting our 1041 application with Pueblo County. And we're going to be submitting at the beginning or middle of next month. And our anticipated hearing date for these projects are going to be on the 8th of October. So we're still working through the land use application through Pueblo County.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Well, a little much ado about nothing, but since we have NextEra reps here, are there any questions for them before we conclude the presentation? All right. Thank you, Nathan and Tricia. Sorry for the alarm.
No worries. Happy to help.
Yeah. Okay, David, if you want to finish up.
Yep. Thank you, Nate. Appreciate that. So the project summary is that the leased acres are around 2,313 acres that would be included in the project, a 2.5-year construction period and a 30-year production lease term. The project would produce 200 megawatts of energy capacity and a storage capacity of 100 megawatts. The total term revenue would be approximately $36 million over the course of the lease. With that, based on the information presented today, staff recommends that the board approve a solar production lease to Thunder Wolf Energy Center, LLC, located on parts of 9 school trust sections in Pueblo County. And the lease will include all of the terms described in this cover sheet. In addition, based on recent conversations between staff, NextEra, and Excel that occurred after the cover sheet and board order went to the board, we learned that there is a high possibility that Excel may not need as much land for the switch yard. So therefore, staff would like to add the northwest quarter of section 31 and township 21 south, range 62 west, which is approximately 160 acres, to the board order. This would potentially add some more acres that could be used for the project if it's not needed for the switch yard. Just to remind the board where that's at. So here's the project, and this is the section that we want to include in the board order right here.
Okay.
So with that, if a board member does elect to make a motion to approve the project, they can accept the board order as written and add the northwest quarter in section 31, township 21 south, range 62 west.
Okay. Thank you, David. Any questions for David? All right. Are there any members of the public who wish to make comment on this item? Just raise your hand.
Nothing's jumping to attention.
Just want to be sure, Nathan, any additional comments for the commissioners on this?
Yes, can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Okay, the only thing I'd just like to clarify on my previous comments were that we have had our pre-application meeting with Pueblo County, and there's already sort of a high level of support for the project. So, there's no reason why we would expect not to gain our approval, on the quoted timeline. So we are in the midst of our permitting process with the county.
Great. Okay, thank you. It seems like an appropriate use. I know we had the workshop back in February, and we heard a lot about some of the concerns about the scale of these projects, particularly in relation to ag land and taking good ag land out of production and other sort of consequences that come with large-scale solar. From my perspective, you know, we heard from Justin describing the conditions of the land and so forth. I mean, this does seem an appropriate and good use given the condition of the land. It doesn't appear to me that we're you know, sacrificing or compromising, and it doesn't appear to me that there's significant neighbor impact, although that might get worked out certainly at the local level. So I do think, though, we probably, and maybe we wait, and actually I wouldn't like to wait until we get production leases from some of the planning leases, you know, that might be a little bit more lack of a better word, controversial or cause for concern amongst those in the ag community or neighboring ranches. So just some thoughts.
Well, I think there's been considerable interest on whether or not the state land board would be doing more with alternative energy. And this seems like a perfect project because of the drought situation on that land. I would hope maybe once it's approved by the county commissioners that Kristen can help us get the word out, because it's a substantial impact on the state's goals for alternative energy. And it seems like this is a perfect combination of not taking good ag land and moving forward on those goals. So I hope we can really promote this once all the full approval process has been completed.
Yep. Okay. We asked for public comment. I don't think we received any. Any further discussion or questions from our commissioners? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion. The draft board order is pretty thorough, fair amount of detail. So I might entertain a motion to accept the board order as drafted in our packets with the addition with the addition of giving staff the authority to add additional acreage. David, can you cite again for me the parcel?
Yes, it is the northwest quarter. Excuse me, the northwest quarter of section 31. Sorry, my my presentation just went away. To pull it up here again.
Okay. Is it in your presentation? I didn't see it.
Yeah, it's in the, well, I'm sorry. It was just in my notes in my presentation.
Okay.
David, I believe you said section 31 of Township 21 South, range 62 West.
That's correct.
Okay. So is there a motion to approve the board order as presented with the additional authorization of staff to add additional acreage if appropriate for that particular parcel? Just need a so moved.
Move.
It's been moved by Commissioner Shaw. The second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Scanlon. Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll take a roll call vote. If in favor, indicate by saying aye. Commissioner Shaw?
Aye.
Commissioner Carney?
Aye.
Commissioner Heath?
Aye.
Commissioner Scanlon?
Aye.
And the chair votes in favor. Motion passes 5-0. Great. Thank you. We're almost there, y'all. I know this has been a substantial effort without a break. Our next to last item is the June board leasing agenda, tab 10, and I believe that's Miss Hawthorne. Welcome to the panel. There you are.
Hi, Commissioners.
Hello.
How are you?
Good.
So for the record, Alicia Hawthorne with the Transactions and Records Services team. This is the June 2020 board leasing agenda. And I've also asked Julie, and David's on the line too, Julie Majors, just in case there are questions, because we have a couple of leases that are appearing on here that are kind of out of the ordinary. So we have, let's see, we have 8 items on the agenda this month. We have one that is an amendment to a commercial lease. We have 2 recreation bids, and then we have 5 new leases, 4 of which are recreation, and then 1 is a right-of-way. So if you have any questions, I'm available to answer them, and I have my backup team also on the line to help me.
I had a question on that one in Boulder County. Is it north of Longmont? Where is that?
Can you help me out with the number on here?
The lease number is REC 113226.
Is it item 1, 2, 3, 4, 5?
It's item 4.
Number 4.
Oh, item 4. Sorry about this. You can give me a quick minute. I will look it up.
It says a recreation lease.
It's to the city of Longmont for part of their open space, is what that says.
It is, okay.
That's the notes in the book, Commissioner.
Yeah, I saw that, but I didn't know if it was, is it actually part of Longmont, 80 acres?
Well, let me see. According to our notes here, I have it down as the city of Longmont. I did not ask Abe to join us, so I certainly can look into that and get back to you.
Yeah, it won't affect my vote, but I'm curious about where it is, because 80 acres.
It looks to me from the map that it's just south of the Larimer County line.
Uh-huh. Okay.
I'll follow up
Okay.
on that.
Any other questions? Comments? Any members of the public wish to make comment or have a question, indicate by raising your hand. Okay, here's none. Seeing no further discussion, I would entertain a motion to approve the June board leasing agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved by Commissioner Heath, second by Commissioner Carney. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll take a roll call vote. If in favor, indicate by saying aye. Commissioner Shaw. Commissioner Carney.
Aye.
Commissioner Heath.
Aye.
Commissioner Scanlon.
Aye.
And for the record, Commissioner Shaw did vote aye. And the chair votes in favor. Motion passes 5-0. Last item, minutes of the May meeting. Any edits, changes, or otherwise? Always very thorough. Appreciate that. Seeing none, we'll approve by acclamation. I do have a quick question for you, Director Ryan, or Julie, or Christopher. Last month, we talked about impact on rents and tenants and so forth. Is there any update for us on that front?
Sure.
Julie?
Yes. Can you hear me, commissioners?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, actually, it seems like things have calmed down. We still have a handful of tenants that we're working through. I would say probably 4 or 5 that are maybe a little bit more problematic. but today, as of June 4th, we only had about $65,000 worth of past due payments. So it keeps coming down every month, and the tenants that we need to work with, we're working with. And so I think we're going to be able to get through this in the next month or two.
Great. Okay. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Director, yeah, Nick.
Commissioner, just one quick note. We noticed in the packet on tab 7, Mike's right-of-way that he brought. I think just about anywhere the length of that right-of-way was noted. It's just, it says blank, comma, 000.
Right. He answered the question though.
Yep. Yeah. And so we'll make sure that the minutes
5,000
reflects it.
And Nick, my board order said 5,000.
Okay. So, just a quarter.
Okay.
So you're getting the better draft there, Bill? You get the better.
I get the most current stuff.
Commissioner Heath.
Well, I wanted to follow up on our conversation last month about some kind of joint meeting with the investment board. I know it's awkward in these times when we're all operating virtually, but it feels like in order to kind of be thinking about when the legislature convenes next year and what we might want to be thinking about, it's worth figuring out what's an appropriate way to schedule that. I guess, John, I don't know if they've met since and if you've had any conversation about that.
Commissioner Heath, the board's met a number of times recently, the Permanent Fund Investment Board. We didn't bring this topic up of coming to report to us for two reasons. One, I think there are some new members who will be joining that board. New members who will be joining that board after June. I'm getting a whole lot of feedback.
You got some reverb going on.
Somebody needs to mute. So there are some terms that are up this June 30th, and I don't know what the treasurer intends to do with the members. Second, the treasurer has been all consumed with the long bill and the budget, and so I didn't want to distract him with that, but I have it on my to-do list. And the Permanent Fund Board was meeting recently to take some money that we had earmarked to go into some open-ended real estate funds. We were trying to add yield to the portfolio, let me put it that way. And so they've been interviewing some managers of some high yield bond products. That was the person I mean, but it's definitely on my list, and I would like to get the treasurer in here in maybe August, September kind of a time frame.
Okay, good, thanks.
It's for sure on my list, Commissioner. I've just been trying not to push the issue right this minute with the legislature still in.
Sure.
Okay. Director Ryan, maybe a preview of July meeting. I do understand that's down to one day on, is that July 10th, July 8th?
Yes, I tried to, I think I sent you an email, but it'll be on Wednesday, July 8th. We were really hoping to get back to real live meetings, but we just don't have clearance to do that yet. So that will be by Zoom. The morning will be about a 3-hour panel that Greg Okish has put together to respond to some of the questions that you all raised in our Chico Basin Ranch discussion. So we're going to talk about some of the economics of owning a ranch and owning that ranch. Then we've got a panel to talk about stewardship and the role of that ranch in the community. And there's someone from Palmer Land Trust and somebody from TNC. And Greg, you're on here and you're
Colorado Cattlemen's.
Yep, Terry Frank Hauser from the Cattlemen's Association.
And the John Malone Family Foundation.
Right. And that panel has some really good, interesting, relevant experience. The Malone family recently tried to sell the Red Top Ranch, which is not far from Chico. Well, relatively not far. and had some stipulations on it around stewardship, around conservation, around younger producers. And so there's some great parallels and lessons, I think, from the panelists who were involved with the Red Top. And then the third part of the discussion will be a panel of 3 or 4 folks who are in the large ranch brokerage business to talk to us about the economics, the scale of these things, what are their values, if you were going to sell something, how would you do that, or if you were going to sell parts of it. And so I think Greg's put together a really thoughtful group of experts for that discussion to help inform some of the decision making on the Chico. And then we'll have some regular business after that. And so I can see us going until 3 on the 8th, 3-ish.
Yeah, probably full day.
Yeah.
Okay. And then August, Zoom again, yes? And unless something changes.
Unless something changes, yeah.
But state, you all have an order to be effectively safer at home until September 7th, right?
We do. Yeah. And that was reinforced with some written guides. I was sensing some loosening of things with some of the orders from CDPHE recently, but we got written clarity on Monday that dashed my hopes for an in-person meeting.
Okay. And then we were trying to put together a water presentation. Do you want to just sort of open it up and make sure commissioners some guidance? You know, we've I think Bill Ruff and team have put together somewhat of a 101 and a look at state land board interests. But if there are specific questions or perspectives that you want to make sure we hear, it'd be good to share with those either now or at least shoot Bill an email so that we can make sure we get the best use of that time.
Greg, you were looking at trying to do that in August.
Yeah, I hope to. We'll have another workshop and an action item on Chico in August. And then this would be another thing we could workshop that same month. So I will start, barring any feedback or with any feedback, I'll start working on it shortly.
Okay. Okay, anything else before we adjourn? I appreciate you all powering through, and as always, thanks to Barb, Kim, Tracy, Nick for orchestrating all the logistics for our meeting. We do appreciate it. These run smoothly. So,
thank you all. Commissioners, thanks very much. Good to see you virtually.
All the best to everyone.
Indeed. Indeed.
Thanks to see you.
Take care.
A couple weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sounds good.
Weeks, Bill.
Take care.